as a people, inherently and historically, opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast, everyone. This is your host, Abe Williams. I'm on a little bit of a limited of a time, so I'm not sure if this will be a full episode or just a smaller, quicker episode. I'm going to try to at least make it to the 30-minute mark. But let me just give you a little update, what I'm doing and what's going on in life. I usually like to open with a little update. Well, me and my wife, we went out yesterday to go ahead and apply for an apartment. We went ahead and filled the paperwork out, went out and checked it out. It's over in Harrisburg, and it actually kind of works out because it's right behind where she works, so she can walk to and from work, which would be nice because our cars have not really been reliable at all this year. We've sank probably about $4,000 into those cars this year, and it's insane. Luckily, knock on wood, feels like we finally got them running good, you know. But it's $550 a month, 2-bedroom, a lot bigger than the apartment we were in. So, I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully we get it. If not, we're just going to keep looking and keep saving paychecks, you know, until we get one. I told her, I said, you know, the guy we're living with, he's not rushing us out the door. So it's like, hell, I'm looking, but it's like I'm taking my time because it's like, if anything, I'm just going to keep stacking chips until somebody finally rents out to us or whatever, you know, till we find the right place. We've got enough saved and I'm ready to move out, definitely, you know, but I'm not going to sit here and beg someone for an apartment either, you know. But yeah, that's what's going on right there with that. 4th of July, I hope everyone had a good 4th of July. Me and Sammy, we got invited to a buddy of mine. He's Ukrainian, so it's kind of cool. We got to try out all these different Ukrainian dishes. It kind of throws you off, like when you first see it. It doesn't look nasty or nothing, but it like, I guess me and her are American, you know, like it tastes totally different than the way it looks. Like one of the dishes were like these little toast points with like some like sort of like cream cheese and raw salmon on it. Another one was kind of like a casserole with herring in it. I don't know, it was really good stuff. And then he gave us like it's like fermented soda, which was really good. It tasted almost like a really sweet beer almost. But we had a good time doing that. So I hope everyone else had a safe and good 4th of July. But let's get going on to the podcast. We got a paranormal story. This one's called The North Room. It's in Red Brook Inn, Old Mystic, Connecticut. There will always be houses that we pass on the road and say to ourselves, if I had a real home to go back to, it would look like that, and the presences of some of the people who once lived in that house would still be there. They would watch over me. The two brothers were about to stay in that sort of place. Historic Haley Valley, circa 1740, and the Crary homestead, built about 30 years later, are nestled on 7 acres of wooded countryside, on a hillside overlooking Route 184 and Wells Road. Albert Clodig and his brother John drove through the wooded New England countryside on a road just outside of Mystic. "That's the Crary house," said Albert. "I was drawn to it the moment I saw its picture." A winding drive led up the large center chimney farmhouse. It was a warm New England red, set back from the road on pasture land, enclosed by stone walls. When was the Crary homestead built?" asked John. "In 1756, during the day of the adventurer Aaron Burr in this country. But with your love of music, you will probably say to yourself, 'Ah, I shall be sleeping in a house built the same year the great Austrian composer Mozart was born.' I shall do that just when we are warmer," said Albert, "for I have found this weather quite cold for March, and am looking forward to a blazing fire within." "And bread and pie, baked in a brick oven?" said John. "Did I mention that?" "We are so glad to see you," said Miss Keyes. She turned to Vern Sasek, her late husband, and asked, "Would you take them up to the north room, dear?" "I'm eager to see Mystic and look forward to our 2 days here before my concert in Manhattan," said John, a professional organist. He was on his way to the city to give a recital at St. Thomas Church, for Albert had prevailed upon him to visit Mystic instead of going directly to New York. "You tell me this place is unique," said John. "Well, I know I don't take enough time to enjoy my life," he admitted. "Often I simply go from one place to another, never experiencing what the places I'm in are really like. This experience in itself will be different," he thought as he entered the Crary house. A large fireplace cast an amber glow over the room as they entered. Looking around him, he thought of old paintings he had seen. There were stenciled floors and iron door latches. Period furniture and lighting devices and New England glass and pewter all captured the spirit of a bygone day. There you go. There's that trigger items and stuff again, whether they're just from the period or they're actually original items with that spiritual attachment. "And when do you cook over the embers on the hearth?" John asked Miss Keyes. "Usually during the holiday season," she replied. "You must come back to visit us." "I shall," he said, staring into the flames. "But now we must retire. Albert and I have much to tour tomorrow. The Mystic Seaport Museum, an aquarium, and historic houses that belong to some early sea captains." The Clodigs went to their room. There were toilet articles on a washstand and a bureau common in the late 1800s, and a large four-poster bed with a thick down mattress stood beside a narrow slate blue door. Since the March night was unseasonably cold, the Clodigs had requested that a fire be lit in their bedroom. Watching the hypnotic flicker of the orange flames, they soon nodded off their reading and fell asleep. Albert says he does not believe in ghosts, but he recalls that cold Thursday night well. Sometime just after midnight, he suddenly woke to see a figure standing in the corner of the room. Looking straight in that direction, I saw a woman with white hair and a shawl wrapped around her, standing in the corner staring at us. For some odd reason, I just thought she belonged there. See, there's something that comes up quite often, I noticed, in definitely within like the paranormal, ghost field, stories and stuff like that. They call it the White Lady. I mean, it's been kind of made famous with like La Llorona and stuff. But she's actually one of those common entities noticed all over the world, whether it's specifically a ghost, of someone who lived there or whatever, or in that area, or is it just like an actual entity within itself that's sighted all over the world? I'm not sure, but the white lady is actually like super common in ghost stories. The way he described the apparition was to call it a pleasantry. I didn't really think of it as a ghost, he said. For a few minutes the woman stood there, her hands folded in front of her, calmly gazing towards the bed. Then she disappeared. When Albert Clodig looked over at his brother, he saw that he was still asleep, so he did not wake him. But it was more than an hour before he went back to sleep himself. Nor has Albert been the only guest to see this mysterious lady, whose clothing and demeanor give the impression of a lady from the past. Miss Keyes herself has felt the presence of the person in the north room. She described on one occasion, when she and her daughter were unpacking boxes upstairs, that they had the distinct feeling that a third person was there in the room with them. My daughter looked up and said, "Mother, I don't think we are alone." I didn't think we were either, but I was reluctant to admit it. More than one guest who stayed in the north room has come to breakfast and told us that we have a presence there, but no one has ever been frightened. In fact, the gentleman said, "You have a friendly spirit in that room I slept in," and he sat down before the crackling fire, unperturbed. He devoured a hearty country breakfast. None of the supernatural events, however, quite surpass a memorable birthday party I held here. The sea captain whom I bought the house from was getting ready to remarry, says Ruth Keyes. His wife had died after 3 months' illness, throat cancer, and 8 months later he married his wife's best friend, who was also widowed. She did not want to live in the Crary homestead, she said. So he sold it to me, and he moved into his second wife's home. Ms. Keyes made the historic Crary homestead part of her bed and breakfast complex, redecorating a suite of rooms for reunions, wedding receptions, and other private functions. About 5 years after his second marriage, the former owner was about to celebrate his 75th birthday, and aware of his affection for his home of many years, his wife called Ruth Keyes. She said that it was her desire to celebrate the occasion with a birthday party for him at the Crary homestead. We made an appointment for her to come over so that we might plan the party, and I left the Haley Tavern to go with her to the Crary homestead, said Ruth. She wanted to plan the arrangement of the buffet, the bar, and the room for the cake and gifts. But the moment we opened the front door, there was a terrible odor, like dead meat. It permeated through the whole house. There's another common thing with paranormal, but usually that's a sign of demonic presence. I'm not saying that that's what this is, but it's usually common that the smell of like rotting dead meat is demonic. It wasn't there this morning when I left, I said in concentration. My own living quarters were in the house, and there had been no odor earlier. I immediately asked my handyman to go check it. He came up to the tavern later that day and said, "Miss Keyes, there isn't any odor there." About a week afterward, the lady came back so that we might discuss the final details about the food for the buffet dinner. The number of bartenders, and when the cake would be delivered. Once more the dreadful odor greeted us. "I hope it doesn't smell like this when the guests arrive," the lady said nervously. That night I watched an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. The subject was supernatural odors. The odor accompanying the story was described as resembling the odor of dead meat. When I told some friends, they say, "Ah, that's the ghost of his first wife. She doesn't want the second wife there." Now I really began to worry. The birthday celebrant was very distinguished, and the party guest included a banker, a state senator, and important people from the Mystic Seaport Museum. I could just imagine the good name of the Crary homestead being ruined by a ghost that smelled worse than a dozen dead skunks. I don't know, or it could be a demon in disguise, you know? That's another thing. They disguise themselves as familiar ghosts, like they pretend to be ghosts when they're actually demons. Like I said, I could be just being negative and more on the, I don't know. It's just a theory. I don't know. On the night of the party, the wife set out with her unsuspecting husband for a destination he thought was to be his favorite restaurant. It was located on the same road as we are. Meanwhile, everyone was gathering here to honor him at the Crary homestead. It was almost time for the guest of honor to arrive, and 50 to 60 people were here. Now the couple came in, and to his delighted surprise he was surrounded by smiling faces of his friends. All was well. Meanwhile, a friend of mine went through the back room to go outside and have a cigarette. The second wife came back to check on things, for he saw her through the window. After finishing his cigarette, my gentleman friend walked through the same room and experienced an almost electrical jolt of horror. The nauseous odor was back. My friend is a scientist, the head of a biology department at a well-known university, and not known for imagining things. He hurriedly aired the room out and went back to join the guests. The disaster had been averted by another that was on the way, says Ruth Keyes, continuing her story. The presents had been opened, and it was time to cut the birthday cake. It was made by a person in town famed for baking excellent cakes. It was his favorite, a lovely moist carrot cake. Everyone stood in a circle offering birthday toast and waited for his wife to cut it. As she tried to cut the first slice, the entire cake fell apart. Underneath the icing was nothing but a pile of crumbs. A sweet revenge? It could seem that the spirit of the first wife prevailed at last. I don't know, I thought that was pretty crazy that it like disintegrated the cake. That actually kind of reminds me, I was listening to a podcast the other night, Paranormal Roundtable, and I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure like either the host or the co-host, they're like I think Hispanic. But I guess in their culture it's common for people to lay out like offerings to the dead. And one of them had said on some occasion that they had laid out plates for the dead, for like dead ancestors and relatives, you know, who died before them, like on a little altar. So they went to try and eat a little bit of it after it had been sitting there for a while, and they said like the flavor was like drained from the food. So I don't know, I find that stuff kind of interesting. Almost like the ghost couldn't physically eat it, but absorbed the flavor of the food, the offering, you know. To me, that stuff's neat. Let's see, I think I got another story in here. Yeah, I got a little bit of time. I'll go ahead and do one more for you. A Shot in the Dark. Hotel de Coronado, Coronado, California. Across from San Diego on a balmy beach by the Pacific Blue is the Hotel de Coronado. It is a legendary place. The Prince of Wales, Edward VIII, Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, Lyndon B. Johnson, Marilyn Monroe, John Wayne, Shirley MacLaine, and countless other celebrities have enjoyed its 1880s opulence. Built when Wyatt Earp was keeping order in Tombstone, the palatial hotel is one of the last great seaside resorts. It has excellent food, a magnificent expanse of ocean, and a haunted room. The hotel on Orange Avenue in Coronado resembles at first a view of a huge colony of many different sized mushrooms, each capped with a pointed red Mediterranean roof. When I went to the desk and inquired about the haunted room, the assistant manager replied abruptly, "We do not have such a thing." There you go. That reminds me of Beaumont Inn. Listen to that podcast if you haven't checked it out. I worked at a hotel for 8 years, and it's ridiculous how weird they are about stuff like that. I nodded politely and asked to see the manager. "Well, we do have a room that some people say is haunted," answered the manager reluctantly. "But of course it isn't." "Would it be possible for me to see it anyway?" "No, I'm sorry, it wouldn't." That seemed a strange reply, so I went on to explain that I was collecting stories for a book of supernatural phenomena at famous places. Again I asked to see the room, and again he refused. "Would you like to rent it?" he asked. "What number is it?" "Number 3502. How odd that he immediately knew the number if it were not haunted. Something must have happened in this room, I thought. "Well, what is the price?" "It would be $105. That seemed reasonable enough for a haunted room, I thought. "Would you kindly show it to me?" "I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't do that. But if you wish to rent it for the night—" "Thank you," I said. "I'll think about it and let you know later." I had another approach in mind, but it could wait. It was time to try the Sunday luncheon buffet in the majestic Crown Room. An impressive display of delicacies graced the long tables, and I observed at least a dozen varieties of luscious-looking desserts. As I sampled the buffet, I admired the dark magnificence of the vaulted oak ceiling, contemplating all the famous people who had dined here. There was a sense of awe at being in the same room where Charles Lindbergh had been honored following his solo flight across the Atlantic in 1927. Here, too, the Prince of Wales had been feted? F-E-T-E-D? Never came across that word, sorry. And unfortunately for a man named Simpson, it was on that occasion that his wife Wallace met the prince. But on with the ghost story quest. After brunch, questioning various employees of the hotel, I discovered that many had heard stories of the room being haunted and some believed them. Through the years, the girl's identity and details of her background gradually came to light. The true story is not a happy one. It is about a wicked stepmother and a lovely young girl. Kate Morgan was born in Dubuque, Iowa, 3 years after the close of the Civil War. Her father was a well-to-do farmer, and when she was a child, he and her mother gave the golden-haired little Kate every advantage. She was in the early teens when her mother died, and her father remarried. Despite the girl's efforts to please her stepmother, Maggie, she was never able to do so, and as time went on, the girl's life became increasingly miserable. The lovely clothes her parents had given her were now tattered and outgrown, and anything Morgan did for his daughter made her stepmother madly jealous. I never understood that, why the whole stepmom, evil stepmother thing. The jealousy, I don't know, it's just weird. I can't wrap my head around it. It just doesn't make sense. Like, I don't know, when my wife, first moved in and stuff, like, she treated my daughter better than my daughter's actual, mom. So it was just, to me, it was just bizarre. But then again, I did kind of put my foot down from the get-go and was like, look, my kid comes first, I don't know, though, but I think men, can get lonely, and pardon my French, honestly, they get pussy, and they're just like, I don't know. That takes, number one priority, I guess. Sadly, that's one of men's downfalls. Let's see, where's that? Lovely, even his bringing her a bright ribbon from the store was an occasion for harsh words from his wife. It irritated Maggie that despite Kate's faded calico dresses, her beauty shone bright as a new Indian head penny. In 1868, Dubuque showed some of the promise and much of its tawdry glitter of the city it would one day become. Rough boot-clad cattlemen trod through the muddy streets, their pockets full of money to squander, and saloons and gambling houses attracted all kinds of men. Demure, well-dressed ladies flourished parasols shielding their delicate complexions from the rays of the blazing Midwest sun as they strolled along the wooden sidewalk in front of the stores. And then there were women whose hair boasted a brassy henna brilliance, and who wore color on their lips as red as the blossoms of the trumpet vines that twined over unpainted shacks. Real ladies could spot that kind in a twinkling. Maggie Morgan always said, and with her sharp tongue was ever ready to point them out contemptuously. Often while Maggie lay languidly on her in bed resting, Kate was sent through the flat Iowa countryside bright with purple phlox and wild roses on errands to the store. One July afternoon she had just come out of the Dubuque Supply Company carrying her purchases when a cattleman grasped her arm. "Uh-oh, someone pervy." "Here's such a pretty gal, I want to buy you a drink," Bill Bailey said. Kate pulled away and tried to pass him, but his bag calloused hands reached out, encircling her waist, and he spun her around to face him. Why is it drunk guys always think, like, I don't know, this would work? "Please let me go. I don't know you, sir." "Wow, you can't get to know me mighty fast." With that, he jerked Kate toward him, and her bag full of groceries fell from her arms, its contents spilling all over the ground. "I seen you before wearing them raggedy clothes. You need a purty dress, a gal like you." He thrust his bearded face close to Kate's own. She screamed, and a knot of men began to gather around them. Kate strained to break free, and as she did, her dress tore at the shoulder. She began to cry. "Now see what you went and done," Bill said, leering at her. "I told you, and you needed a purty dress, and I'm going to take you to get it." "You're not taking her anywhere," a hard-edged masculine voice spoke up from the crowd. Bill Bailey glared at the man, and the crowd parted to let pass. A tall, well-built fellow with bright blue eyes, curly black hair, and expensive clothes. It was obvious he was no cattleman. Bailey released Kate, and, fist raised, started for the stranger, but stopped abruptly when the man's hand slid toward his pocket. That meant a pistol. Bailey turned away, melting into the little knot of onlookers. The stranger covered Kate's bare shoulder by putting his jacket around her and began picking up the contents of her bag from the dirt on the main street. "I want to see you safely home," he said. "What's your name, young lady?" "Kate Morgan, and yours, sir?" "Lou Garou." She rode behind him on his horse, and Garou seemed in no hurry. He had gotten off a Mississippi riverboat that afternoon and was in town to enjoy himself. In answer to her question about his occupation, he said, "Just a traveling businessman," and that he would be moving on in a day or so. He came back to see her that night and the following afternoon. Much to everyone's astonishment, he appeared at the Morgans' farmhouse with a box of pretty clothes for Kate. Since he was still there at supper time, they invited him to sit down and share their meal. When Garou showed up about noon on the third day, he asked Kate's father if he could marry her. The surprised farmer told Garou that he did not know as to how his daughter should marry a traveling man. "Well, it's time I settled down on some land of my own," Lou replied, chewing thoughtfully on a blade of grass. Kate's father liked the sound of that. And her stepmother, eager to get rid of the girl, said, "It's high time Kate got married." So a justice of the peace performed the ceremony, and after Morgan pressed a $50 note into his daughter's hand, it was the first time since her mother's death that Kate had seen tears in his eyes. The river looked like a sheet of gold in the late afternoon sun as the couple boarded a Mississippi packet heading towards Savannah, Fulton, Comanche, and Moline. The names all sounded exciting to Kate, but while the big paddles of the boat rhythmically pounded the water, Kate found out what her husband's business was. He was a gambler. That night she cried and told him he had deceived her. He became angry and asked her what's the difference his making a life gambling made if she cared about him. If she didn't, she could always go home. Kate could just imagine the anger in her stepmother's face if she showed up at the front door. There was nothing to do but to make the best part of it. From then on, Lou and Kate traveled everywhere there were gambling tables and card games. When they were not on river boats, they stayed in cities like San Francisco or Sacramento, anywhere Lou could find games and high enough stakes. Usually he registered Kate under the name Mrs. Anderson Bernard. Whether this was his real name or one he had chosen to protect his identity, if there was trouble he would never say. But Kate did know that after the card games there were sometimes hot words and angry losers. In a few years she settled in Visalia, California, while Lou went on traveling. Sometimes he would show up unexpectedly, promise her he was going to change, stay for a week or two, then leave again. During one of these visits, Kate said, "Why can't we live like other people do?" "You're right, honey. We'll buy us a little house in Los Angeles and start a family," he said, hugging her. They bought the house he had promised, and for a while Lou seemed content, because he was. So was Kate. There were games around town and money rolled in. Lou tried hard not to become too greedy. He would win a few games, then let himself lose one or two, keeping his bets small. But after 4 or 5 months of this, he began to get restless. It was just like it had always been when they stayed anywhere for long. The stakes in the games weren't big enough, or there was money to be made elsewhere, Frisco or Denver. Then one night he didn't come home. He had never done that before or left town without telling her. That was the 1st of October in 1892, and a few weeks later Kate found that she was pregnant. She wanted to tell Lou, but where was he? Just before Thanksgiving a letter arrived. He wrote that he didn't think he would be able to settle down, and it wasn't right for a pretty woman like her to be settled down with a drifter. He would see her in a few weeks and bring her the money for her to get a divorce. "You keep the house," he wrote. "A man like me has got no use for one." Kate was heartbroken, but sure that when he found out about the baby everything would change. She would find him. One of his favorite haunts was the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego. There was all the money she had saved from the emergency under the fancy black and gold French clock he had once given her. The next day she bought some lovely new clothes with part of it. She would go to San Diego and join him. He would be happy over her news. Everything would be the way it was during the early years, except that now there would be 3 of them. When she arrived at the Hotel de Coronado, she registered as Mrs. Lottie Anderson Bernard. She could scarcely wait to dress and go to the game room. When she did arrive and look in the door, there sat Lou playing cards at one of the tables. A pretty woman, her arms looped affectionately around his neck, leaned over him as he played. Kate saw him lay cards on the table, smiling triumphantly, and reach up to touch the woman's arms. You might have heard her heart break. You might have heard a tear drop, if it were possible to hear either. Lou did not look toward the doorway, and Kate never entered the room. Turning quickly away, she walked through the vast lobby, out to one of the carriages sitting in the front of the hotel, and gave the driver the address of a shop in San Diego. When the carriage brought her back to the hotel, she was carrying a paper bag. Back in room 302, Kate unfolded the pretty clothes she had bought the day before she left Los Angeles, threw them in the fireplace, and touched the newspaper beneath the kindling with one of the large wooden matches from the small white china matchbox on the mantel. Then she took from her suitcase a bracelet of woven hair with a picture of a man's face set in the medallion centerpiece, looked at it, and threw it into the fire on top of the clothing. Last to go into the flames was her pocketbook. Picking up the paper bag, Kate started down the long carpeted hallway to the elevator. The door of the ornate brass cage closed behind her. Was there anything else she should do? Yes, one more thing. "Is a Mr. Lou Garou registered here?" she asked, stopping at the desk. The clerk went through the cards on the rack. "Yes, madam, through Sunday." "May I have a piece of paper?" Kate wrote 3 sentences on it. Lottie Bernard was registered in room 302. She loved you very much. She came to tell you your child was on the way. "Would you have someone take this note to him in the game room in about 15 minutes?" "Of course, madam." It was raining heavily when Kate went out of the hotel door leading to the oceanfront veranda. She heard the angry rumble of thunder and paused for a moment as flashes of lightning illuminated the scene. Then she reached into her paper bag and, withdrawing the .44 pistol, placed the barrel against her right temple and fired. Muffled by the crashing dissonance of the storm, the shot went unheard. An early riser found her rain-soaked body the next morning, and a crowd of shocked guests gathered on the veranda. Whether a gambler who called himself Lou Garou was among them will never be known. Opinions of the hotel staff varied, from denials that anything ever happened here to admitting nervousness when they entered the room that was once 302 and today is room 3502. An examination of the floor plan of the hotel in 1892 reveals that this was once a larger room with a cozy fireplace made smaller to accommodate the present built-in bathroom. One of the elevator operators was more communicative than some of the other members of the staff. He said guests had questioned him about eerie lights flickering outside 3502. So that's cool, some orbs. Once a gentleman said he had encountered a young woman in an old-fashioned dress and coat standing soaked to the bone at the door of the room late at night. He told of maids hearing the sound of weeping inside. The next morning, when they unlocked the door to clean, the room had not been occupied. Over the years, the story persists. Stormy nights especially give rise to them. Does poor Kate still return to weep over her gambling husband and unborn child? So here's a little info about the place if you ever want to stay. There is no resort hotel on either coast that can quite match the Hotel del Coronado, which is a National Historic Landmark. Whether you rent room 3502 or not, a stay in the Seaside Palace is unforgettable. For reservations or information, write to the Hotel del Coronado, 1500 Orange Avenue, Coronado, California, 92118, or telephone 619-435-6611. That's 619-435-6611. So I don't know. What do you guys think of that? All these stories are supposed to be true stories, but where they are paranormal and stuff, I would like you guys' pretty much opinion on what you think about it. That second one was pretty screwed up, man. As someone who's been a victim of a cheating spouse, that stuff sucks, man. I can't stand that. It's pretty sad too. But I'm gonna end it there. I'm glad I got a full episode in for you all. Hopefully I can get this out tonight. And like and subscribe, make a comment, share if you want, and you all have a good day.
We are as a people inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.